Welcome to the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. I'm your host, Rafael CEO and co-founder of Genialis. On this podcast, we discuss the future of healthcare and health technology, and how advances in data and data science are fueling the next industrial revolution. Please subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more information on Genialis and our unique approach to AI-driven precision medicine, please visit our website at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com. Now, on to the show. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Talking Precision Medicine. It's my distinct pleasure to invite my friend James Zanewicz onto the show. James and I have known each other for a while. We've done work together on the board of the Alliance for AI in Healthcare. And James is relatively new in his role as CEO of Connect. But rather than have me tell you about it, James, welcome to the show. And why don't we jump in and tell us about Connect? Tell us about your role and your vision.
Yeah, so Connect is why it was so attractive to me. It is the original accelerator in the world before that word existed. It's the original intentional ecosystem builder in the world before that term existed. It's been doing that for 41 years now. And at its best, kind of in our kind of 3.0 iteration right now, is we are connective infrastructure where we help companies, we help founders, investors, universities, industry partners, civic leaders, whatnot out there to find each other faster and at the right moments and work together more intentionally. Because as you become a mature ecosystem, and if you're an innovation vertical founder coming out, there's 300 plus places that they all say they're there to help you. Most of them want some sort of cash, want some sort of equity. Connect, as a nonprofit, still helps founders in exchange for nothing. As a nonprofit supported by an incredible diversity of people, we're able to be unbiased in the advice we give. And so, our mission is not just to have events or celebrate innovation. We do that on occasion, but our mission is to help those promising companies get traction, credibility, visibility, capital access, and to meet the right partners or make the relationships at the right moment. And that matters really here in San Diego, where bio is coming in 2026, because this region has incredible science. We have incredible tech, defense, data, climate, life science, binational health, AI, all those resources and assets in an incredible abundance of verticals. But ecosystems don't organize themselves. And without connective tissue, great regions can become fragmented and not function appropriately. And so we help that ecosystem behave more like an ecosystem should. Or as I like to call it, we are the e-conduit, and we're trying to coin yet another new word.
That's amazing. I didn't appreciate that Connect was sort of the first incubator. And, people everywhere recognize sort of the Bay Area and Boston as these like innovation ecosystems. Most people in the know would then probably name San Diego next. But it's interesting to me that San Diego is kind of like the OG here. How far back are we talking?
Yeah, we were the first accelerator in the world. And the reason I say first intentional ecosystem is because San Francisco, the Bay Area, will say they were first. They weren't intentionally built, it just happened. San Diego actually came together and chose to build the ecosystem.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense then. And other things San Diego is known for, and known as, again, you'll see it on placements there. It's the genomics capital of the world. It's got the best weather in the world. What do you think though makes it special for what you do? Why is it such a great place to have this kind of intentional incubation?
Yeah, I'll say the special sauce is one that it is a big small town in many ways. It's incredibly collaborative. It is a place where you see people help their competitors because they view their competitors, yeah, acceleration and improvement as good for the entire ecosystem, which is good for them. And you don't see that everywhere. And I do
Sort of a rising tide.
Rising tides, yeah, and I think that in large part goes back to our founding, where one of our 7 founders was Dr. Mary Walshock, who's a PhD sociologist. So we had scientists, engineers, and then a PhD sociologist who understands, how systems and societies are built, crafting what I would argue is the best innovation society on the planet. And that's why it's been copied in 50 countries around the globe. And your other areas that I think are more competitive, it was more so just the business people, the scientists, the engineers coming together to do things and move it forward, but they didn't have that intentionality. And I think that's what makes San Diego really special.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and of course, they're great universities, right? There's, I mean, a ton of academic power. There's great industry. Maybe the most notable is Illumina, but of course, there's lots of others. Not to mention the convention traffic, right? I think I've got 3 conventions in San Diego this year, at least, that I'm going to.
I look forward to having you over to the balcony to have a drink with me then.
Yeah, so this episode is most likely to air just ahead of Bio, right? And so James and team will be playing host at the Bio annual convention in San Diego in June, which I'm really looking forward to. Uh, but what I wanted to ask then is, that's all well and good, and obviously there's enough incubation to be done in San Diego, but you have more of a global view. So how do you see the work you're doing in your big small, or small big city, or small or big small city? How do you view that on a global stage? Like, how do you spread the impact?
Yeah. So we like to talk about being global architects of innovation now, and it doesn't mean that we don't honor our history and our charge to stimulate the San Diego innovation ecosystem. And we do focus on San Diego entrepreneurs, but we stop thinking smaller in many ways because a regional convener brings people into a room for the region, but a global innovation architect designs pathways, proof points, partnerships, which also include visibility and capital access that allow the region's innovation infrastructure to move forward into the world. And we like to think of that through those 3 lenses, really pathways, which is helping founders and innovators navigate that ecosystem without any bias, confusion, making the most of their resources and getting to the right place at the right time. Proof is helping the companies in the region demonstrate credibility, outcomes, and readiness. And that's both for our founders, but also for people who choose to support Connect and be on our board because they are seen as credible because the board does self-select and evaluate each other and make sure they're the right people to have in the room. And finally, it's the platform bit, which is the thing that, quite honestly, San Diego has historically been really shy about. We've been very Australian in a way, and not wanting to brag and not wanting to stand too tall among the poppies and tell our story. And Connect, we have the Connect Current podcast now. We do press releases for our companies. We partner with every conference we can, whether they're here or somewhere else around the world. And that's so that we're telling the story of our innovation, verticals in ways that attract capital, talent, partners, and global attention. And so really what it boils down to, and I always credit Tari Sapropto with this because she said this about me when they were asking her what I would do here. And she says, if James is in that role, Connect will bring the world to San Diego and take San Diego to the world. And I view that as our mission. And while we are very local for our support of startup companies, except for the Alliance for AI and Healthcare that I know we'll talk about later. That is a global program. It's the one global program that we run as we reestablish it. You are able to do all those things at once if you're doing your job well.
I love that, and I wonder if, in some ways, San Diego's historical reticence to toot its own horn, but also the intentionality that you describe in building this makes it in some ways more of a neutral arbiter for global innovation, right? There isn't maybe the inherent bias of you've got to be in this city, like stage here. You can come through, you can work with us. It makes it a little bit more collaborative and less threatening, in the vein of the rising tides to lift all boats.
I think it's partly that and partly also that 50 countries around the globe licensed for nothing. We did it for free, but licensed Connect in a box. And we taught them
Okay.
how to build ecosystems. And then you have multiple regions across the US as well, but there are 50 other countries. Some have an entity they still call Connect. There's like Norway Connect, there are 3 Sweden Connects, there's Ireland Connect, or they changed the name to something more local, but Connect really was the inspiration globally for many regions to do this.
I'll have to look up how to say connect in Norwegian, but no, that's wild. So you have essentially like a playbook, and what else comes in this box? The connect in a box. How to
Yeah, and so that was done years ago under like the Connect 2.0 model, which is kind of like the basics of how to do programs, how to build your ecosystem. And so if we do things right over the next year or two, the new box will be how do you make your ecosystem behave more like an ecosystem as those ecosystems grow up and become more like San Diego's.
That's really fantastic, and no doubt ambitious. Can you give us just maybe a little bit of a sneak peek at what are some of the kind of highlights or headlines around, going from just being say a nucleator to an actual ecosystem? And I'm asking for a friend, but I'm here in Houston, and I've watched the ecosystem here over the last decade, and it's made a lot of strides. But I work from home here in Houston, and I can go months without being part of the ecosystem because it doesn't have that magnetism or that gravity.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is getting out of the home, and I think COVID did a lot of damage, to San Diego even in that way, and we've come back from it now. But it's getting in the room, and it's those, that those creative collisions that only happen when you're out having a coffee or you're out at an event or, just being intentional. And the great thing about San Diego is it is a large area with an incredible diversity of innovation verticals and diversity of people, but it is very spread out too. Like it can take you a couple hours to drive from one side of the county to the other if you have meetings across the county. And so you do have to make those moments happen versus just hoping they happen. And I think San Diegans are really good at that. And the fact that one of our most important things here, I think, is work-life balance. People will get out some life balance things together that maybe aren't work related, but do engender relationship development, which
Oh,
helps.
absolutely.
And the weather doesn't hurt for that either, because it's never miserable unless it's cloudy, and then everyone gets really depressed.
Yeah. No, that you know, there's something to that. There absolutely is. I was about to say that we have some great weather days here too, but it's usually either too humid or too rainy or too something, right? Well, that's incredibly illuminating, and there's a lot more to connect than I actually appreciated initially. I'm interested to understand, how you came to this role, though. So when we first started working together, you were, correct me if I'm wrong, chief business officer of Tulane Medical School.
So I was first, yep.
Okay, so that's where I know you, but maybe tell the story from back to front. You were a chemist undergrad. You went to law school. How'd you get into this? How'd you end up in the sciences? How'd you end up in company building?
I mean, so I came out of as a chemist and was a chemist for a year and made paint and watched it dry in a project that failed and was like, the bench is not for me. And so then I don't know if you remember, Raphael, there's an old Doonesbury cartoon from the 90s where they're like, I don't know what to do in life. I'll go to law school. Hold me. And I went out and mowed the grass and took the LSAT and knocked that test out of the park without studying for it. I can promise you that is not an indication of how well you will perform in law school, but decided, oh, this means I should go to law school. It clearly did not, but I went to New Orleans and to Tulane, and that experience transformed my life. I'm very proud to say I paid off law school last Friday. So
Congratulations.
very happy about that. Finally done and paid for. But learned a lot of ways about critical thinking and got immersed in new media and some other things as part of that that was really cool. But then that led to working in TV and film, which then led to working in knowledge transfer, tech transfer at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where I got to attend a conference and hear Dr. Mary Walshock, who I spoke about before, speak about Connect when I was 29, I think. Um, and so had always been kind of enthralled with what Connect had done, and everywhere I was every ecosystem I was part of was obviously, 10, 15, 20 years behind San Diego, but you could go back and kind of learn from them. So it followed Connect forever. And it was this really incredible organization in the field that everyone looked up to. And when I had several people send me this role when it came, like I was not looking, I was in my dream job at my alma mater in my dream house that became my albatross until it sold last week. I wasn't
Last
looking.
week was a big
Oh,
week.
it was a big week. It was a whole lot of stuff. But just figuring kind of all that out, and then people sending me this, and I said the job looks amazing. I agree, but it literally says you should have been part of the San Diego ecosystem for like 10 to 15 years. I clearly have not. I live in New Orleans, and I had a small group of three friends, one of which is Elaine Ham, who I know you know well, Holly Meadows and Mike Rondelli, and they're harassing me like, just send the board chair an email. So I just sent him out and said, hey, James, he's also James. I said, I am likely not what you're looking for, but told him the story about having seen Mary and what I thought about Connect and how if he'd like to have a conversation, I'd love to do that. And we just had a conversation, never sent a resume for the job, and it just steamrolled from there. And it was the amazing opportunity to be part of reimagining a legacy at a moment in a city that really needs that, where you can have tremendous impact. And I am a mission driven person, and I could probably make a lot more money doing a lot of other things, but I've got the most incredible team. Like my team here is incredible. They're all passionate. They all believe in changing San Diego for the better. And it's a moment when we can do that as an organization.
No, that's a great story. I'm just pondering for a moment this idea of hiring from within, or building the leadership from within versus bringing in an outsider. And I don't think there is a right or wrong path. I think it's very context dependent, but there is certainly a tried and true advantage to having fresh blood, fresh perspective, someone who's you know done tangential things that are important, but elsewhere, because it's real hard to step away from, all the scar tissue of grinding in a situation. So I can see the board's chair's perspective on that. What were you doing at Tulane though, in your dream job, in your dream house, that kind of, set you up for this?
Yeah, so I started as chief business officer and ended as chief strategy officer, and initially just corporate investor partnerships in the really broad sense, and that was both, helping to push things out with our tech transfer team, but also pulling things in for our academic medicine, perspective, and things like that. And that's why I got so engaged with AI in healthcare, and how you and I met was I saw this as a next wave coming. Constantly trying to look ahead. Also, when COVID hit, I got tasked with communications, marketing, clinical service line marketing, rebranding. I have logos on the top of hospital buildings now from our new partnership that I designed, which is just crazy and something I never thought I would say in life. Like the new logo for Tulane Medicine that is on the hospital I designed during COVID, which is kind of crazy. And then you just any kind of special initiative the dean needed to get done. COVID hit, and my parents raised me with a work ethic, and I was like, instead of sitting at home and reading books as many people did, I was in the office 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, doing whatever needed to be done. Some of that had to do with my job early on, fielding calls from corporate partners because we had one of the seven national primate research centers. Infectious disease focused. Tulane was founded based on infectious disease. So during COVID, incredibly valuable. Cell phone ringing off the hook, connecting people in to do that critical research to help advance and you combat COVID, but then also doing all the other bits and pieces, standing up a vaccine clinic, testing clinics. Yeah, it's helped start a nursing program, like a whole bunch of bizarre stuff that had you ever told me I would do in my life, I'd have said you were crazy. And it just was super fun with one of the most amazing teams ever. I was fortunate to have incredible colleagues. One of which I'm going to shout out right now because she passed away last week. But Sharon Courtney, who was our VP of Government and Community Relations at Tulane, spent her entire career advocating for higher ed, for science, for advancements, and then succumbed to stage 4 colon cancer last week. And just one of the brightest lights and sharpest strategists I've ever met. And there's a whole host of people I got to work with, but it was also like San Diego, a very special place to work.
Yeah. Wow. I'm trying to remember, COVID and the work ethic going along with it. Certainly the like work from home created this impetus to just work more. But also, the all right, well, there is no such thing as not my job anymore. I learned that in restaurant
No,
kitchens.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think it divided
Yeah.
people. There were some people who said that. And some people were like, it is not my job. And some people were like, I'm doing everything. And I was raised to, you do everything.
And I think being able to communicate, right? Being able to write, being able to talk, being able to think visually and get your message across. That's one of those kind of evergreen skills. And I think if someone catches wind, you're good at that. You're in for a lot more work
Yeah,
assignments.
100%. Yeah, that was where one of our previous associate deans, Margaret Bell, who also passed away of cancer. I've had a lot of that touch my life lately, but Margaret was also one of my best friends at Tulane, and she and I had gone to drinks together. And when COVID hit, she's like, "Do I remember that you produced videos at Warner Brothers?" And I'm like, "You do." She goes, "Good, because we can't interview residents in person right now, so you're going to produce videos for them." And I was like, well, all right, let me figure this out. It's been 25 years, but let's go.
So let's get in the way back machine. You produce videos at Warner Brothers. How? Why? What was that part of your life about?
So I stood up the new media division for the TV show Extra, or Extra, the half-hour daily entertainment news show. So, was compressing and producing videos and video clips for TV, film, that kind of stuff to promote entertainment out there through keyword extra on AOL and then extratv.com. So shout out to Extra, which is still around.
Yeah, I don't have an age breakdown of our listeners, but I'm guessing about half of them aren't going to know what a lot of those words means. It's just AOL. What's AOL?
Yeah, AOL. They can go to the museum in DC and lift up and kind of hear the screech, which that was sad when that was like even I think 15 years ago. And I was like, oh, one of my first jobs is in a museum. Yay.
Hey there. Before we get back to the conversation with James, I'd like to take a moment to highlight an organization that's helping shape the future of our industry. The Alliance for Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, or the AAIH, brings together leaders across the industry, from healthcare, life sciences, technology, and policy, to advance the responsible adoption of artificial intelligence in medicine. Genialis is proud to be a founding member alongside organizations such as Roche Genentech, In Silico Medicine, Recursion Pharma, Envisagenics, and many others. And if you'll be joining us at Bio in San Diego, I'd like to extend an invitation. On Tuesday evening, the Alliance for AI in Healthcare, now powered by Connect, along with friends and partners, will host a special reception celebrating the next chapter of the Alliance. If you're interested in the future of AI in healthcare, we'd love to see you there. Later in this episode, James and I will talk more about the Alliance and its future, and we'll include links to the Alliance and to Tuesday's event in the show notes. For now, let's get back to the conversation. I want to get into talking a little bit about artificial intelligence and your interest there and the work you've done and where you're seeing this show up in San Diego. And maybe by way of a segue, what I was just thinking about when you're talking about designing a logo and so forth. Now, nowadays, and by nowadays I mean in the last 2 years, since sort of the quote ChatGPT moment, right? Since Gen AI became a tool at all of our fingertips, these kinds of creative tasks are being undertaken by everybody constantly, right? Um, and maybe some of it's good and a lot of it's not. But also that that email that you wrote to the board director of Connect was something that you put some personality into, some of your personal experience, your genuine thoughts. You and I both, I've been working on delivering commercial AI for 11 years, and I've been working on it in a scientific context for over 15, since way before it was cool. And I myself am shocked by how far it's come and how ubiquitous it is. Even though we were pushing for its adoption, the ubiquity is scary, or novel anyway. What I find scary though is I find communication to be not just producing content, but it's a thought process. And I'm worried about us losing the muscle memory of the thought process, the creative process, because it's too easy. And I'd love for your opinions on that, and then maybe we'll find our way into AI in healthcare, where I think it has some very bullish applications.
No, I absolutely agree with that, and I think there's a balance to strike, and you look at studies that are out there even now, and it says that if we rely too much on AI, we start to lose the ability to kind of have that creative cognitive spark in how we think through things, how we write them. And so I try and have a healthy balance of putting a good bit of structure of myself in and a good bit of the hard work, but leveraging the tool as a tool and not a crutch, and using it enough. But I do wonder if for our younger work generations that are coming up, where they didn't have to learn the other way of actually grinding and editing and working with actual people back and forth. Is communication going to suffer more? It's something that does concern me, as well as like, what is communication going to be like in the future? Is it just going to be AI talking to AI, or is there actually going to be that human spark in there? And I wonder 20 years from now what it's going to look like. And I don't have the answer, and I don't have the solution for how to fix it. But I agree, it's one of the few things that does concern me, is, are we going to lose our ability to be more human and more creative in some ways?
Yeah, I worry about that. I worry again, just the muscle memory of process, right? Like writing is a crucible for thought of how we refine our thoughts. We shall see. Meanwhile, again, I'm out here as a peddler, right? I sell AI for a living, and
Yeah.
I do it because I think and I do it because I think it's important. I think certainly in healthcare, in medicine, that the patterns that we need to be able to identify to deliver better healthcare results are just too complicated to pick out any other way. I think AI is uniquely suited for that kind of job, right? So that's what I do. Is this just table stakes now? The company's coming up through Connect, you're incubating. Do they even bother to put AI in the description, or is it just understood that there's a role for it?
It's a bit of both. I think it's becoming more and more that AI is not a vertical. AI is something that is in every vertical, and I argue with people that that is why San Diego is so well positioned, because we'll be the place that necessarily invents all the new advances in AI. Maybe not, but are we the place that can help apply that to the broadest diversity of verticals of any place in the world? Yes, we are. And so, I think kind of our AI ethos is the AI, and like AI in healthcare, AI in tech, AI in defense or national security, AI in binational health. It's the AI and is where we're really going to excel. We're fortunate to actually have, some great research going on both at SDSU, at UCSD, in AI development as well. But a lot of that research is in how do you apply it to the practical things. I think is incredible.
And just to clarify for my own sake, Connect is not healthcare specific. Is that correct?
No, no, no. We are
It's
we are
yeah.
every innovation vertical.
All right. Amazing.
Yep.
So that in and of itself is a big expansion of your scope. I mean, you've been,
Oh,
you know,
100%. Yeah, back to my old days at Illinois and Louisville, where I had every kind of innovation and research, unlike Tulane, where I was just in medicine. So I've had that before. But like Tulane and at HHMI, I was very medicine focused, so super deep in medicine for a
yeah.
period of 16 years.
No, this is just kind of dawning on me how big an open remit that is, and because I'm so myopically focused, even not within healthcare, I'm very focused on drug development in one therapeutic area, right? You can get really, really sort of niche. Where outside of healthcare, where are you seeing maybe the most interesting, the most surprising, the most transformational applications of AI? Like what's really kind of blown your mind about, in this vertical, this is going to really change how things are done.
I think in finance it's gonna have a tremendous early modification because it can do and make people way more efficient and handle a lot of the things that used to be done by people. I'm curious to see where it goes with law and how it disrupts law. And I've been fortunate to meet some really cool friends and colleagues here in San Diego who are actually in the law field and analyzing that themselves and like what is the legal field going to look like in 10 years with the ability to as AI gets better and doesn't hallucinate and you're able to kind of put the guardrails on with agentic agents to do a lot of the work and will you perhaps have AI agents negotiating against each other, understanding what both sides wants and getting to perhaps a better, faster solution for less cost. It's possible, and, like, my good friend Mark Sadam at NYU Langone actually wants to do a test negotiation with a company at some point on one of his texts. He's like, "I would love for them to put it on their side, what matters to them, for us to put it on what matters to us, and get the license out from that," and kinda see and he's doing some really cool stuff with custom-built AI, and he may already be doing that, but, like, I always like looking at them in that space because he is such a leader in what he's doing there and being creative and thinking about it.
My two reactions to that. One is Alex Sharankov, who you and I are both friends with through the Alliance for AI and Healthcare, the CEO and co-founder of In Silico Medicine, does make noise on LinkedIn. If you weed through enough of the things he makes noise about, automating the business development and sort of the search and evaluation, out licensing process, and drug development with AI. And again, just making it very empirical. You're looking for a drug that does this. Here's the data room, and how much of that can be made agentic. So you should connect him with your buddy at NYU. I think that Alex would do that test case. He loves proofs of concept with this stuff.
Absolutely.
But my second instinct or reaction is, so I'm very much an accidental business person. My wife has an MBA from Kellogg. I went to her reunion, 5-year reunion some years ago, and got to sit in on classes. It was sort of like, what did the spouses do? And I did the negotiation class, and it was a practical, and my team finished dead last in the first negotiation. We were just miserable. And the reason we finished dead last is because we thought we were clever and we were going to outsmart the other team, and we treated it very winner take all adversarial. And the point of the whole lesson was that there is a theoretical maximum or optimum for every negotiation that is a win-win where both parties maximize the points. And that is something AI should be able to find, is what is the win-win maxima based on how, if you get 5 criteria and you get to assign weights of how important they are, the AI should
Yeah.
solve that in a hurry.
Yeah, or at least get you to an easier starting point, right? Where you're just tweaking and you're not going hardcore. And I'm curious to see how that transforms kind of the negotiation and business development arm too, which again is law in a way, but also business in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess how much do companies want a competitive advantage by having savvier BD people versus how much you just want to get the goddamn deal
Yeah,
done?
absolutely right.
And and maximize both parties. I guess it depends if it's a hostile takeover or like a collaborative co-development agreement or something, right?
100%, and is it more important to have the biggest win or it has speed to market and get it done quickly? Like there's all the various factors to put into that, could affect, does it need to be people or does it need to be, you know, an agent that helps with it? Like it's interesting.
Well, if procurement takes, I don't know, on average 9 to 12 months, and let's just say pharma, right? Could we make that 9 to 12 days, right? Like one human read instead of,
I
yeah.
think so.
All right, so free
Yeah.
startup idea.
Or even 9 to 12 hours
If
potentially.
if
Yeah.
if you're a founder looking to start a company in San Diego, James will incubate your AI for BD
We
negotiation company.
accelerate, we don't incubate. We don't have
You
space.
will sorry, you will accelerate.
We'll accelerate. But we can get them to some really great incubators. Like, in our new iteration, the cool thing about Connect is before we just did the programs we offered, now San Diego is our program. And every single one of those 300 plus places out there, they are part of our program. So if someone needs an incubator, we can get you to the right one of the multiple that are here, or to the right couple and let you choose. Would say these are the ones that are right for you at this moment, which is the fun part.
Very, very cool.
So we get to play with all those ways.
Well, again, not to be biased, but because I am in healthcare, I want to talk a little bit about AI in healthcare, specifically the
Yeah,
alliance, the
100%.
Alliance for AI in Healthcare. So, for those of you who don't know, or new listeners who or you've been under a rock, there's an amazing organization called the Alliance for AI in Healthcare. It's about 7.5 years old. It was stood up with a mission to foster the responsible adoption of AI in the giant healthcare umbrella, this $4 trillion a year industry. James and I both were recently board members, but even more recently, Connect has subsumed the Alliance. The Alliance is now a program within Connect. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have a global program now? And what do you plan to do with the Alliance?
Yeah, so this is where we're working on bringing on the right staff person to help us relaunch it. We were looking at a director of AI. Now I think we're looking at maybe a program manager for the Alliance for AI in Healthcare, so that we can re-onboard the previous members in a more affordable structure. And so basically, we're a 501(c)(3), so we run a program instead of an industry association. It'll run roughly the same way. We educate about issues as opposed to advocating for a position. But when you're educating, you can make points, and so it's going to operate much in the same way, but it gets the power of Connect, this 41-year-old organization behind it, that, as we talked about, has been spun out into 50 different countries around the globe and across the US. And so we get this automatic built-in network, and we're working on relaunching it at Bio this year, which was in San Diego. And when you look at the fact that you have Qualcomm here, you have UCSD and SDSU who are both playing in this space, you have a lot of startups, and the fact that anything in healthcare now is driven by data or technology, pretty much. Like, nothing is just straight biology anymore. Even if it is a biologic or something, you probably had tech or data heavily involved creation at some point. So life science is not just life science anymore. It is this AI or tech and that's where I find it exciting, is that, again, this is the place in the country where I think that AI can really be successful and accelerate. Our community is very excited about bringing the Alliance for AI in Healthcare here in as an entity powered by Connect. We're excited to relaunch it and to really have the first of our global programs in decades powered by Connect again, and to treat it as a model. And once it's successful, maybe we do it for other spaces as well, especially as they relate to AI.
No, I'm super excited about this. I think there's some key advantages here, and I would say that the most successful things we did in the Alliance were educational anyway, right? Whether that meant we were educating congressmen and regulators, or educating investors, or whomever, right? The point
Or
is,
each other. Yeah.
or each other. I mean, again, flashback 7.5 years, AI wasn't obvious to most people. We struggled to get stages to speak on at JP Morgan, right? Now the NVIDIA talk is the hardest one to get into. And so we were kind of fighting two opposing things. One was this idea that AI was all hype, and we knew it was real, and so we needed to prepare the ground for success, right? Drugs are going to get there, diagnostics are going to get there, et cetera. And then the flip side is, there were lots of charlatans, lots of people putting AI in their URLs who weren't doing any AI, and we didn't want to get a black eye by bad actors. And so it was very much education. And I'm thrilled to know that there's a really storied organization that can shepherd it forward.
Yeah, and we're excited for that as well, and cannot wait to see what happens. So anyone who's interested should reach out to us. They can reach out to me at james@connect.org, and happy to get them plugged in as we relaunch it.
Fantastic. And if you're going to be a bio, James or I, and we can also point you to others in the group, would love to meet up. Let's talk about bio a little bit, and more importantly, so bio is kind of the business conference, right, for the life science industry. It's, if JP Morgan is the investor meeting, bio is the business meeting. And I'm interested in your perspective now that you preside in an organization that looks at lots of verticals, lots of industries. The business climate in life sciences has been, we'll call it tough these last 4.5, 5 years since the end of 21. How do you see the business climate, especially for the startups that you're accelerating? How do you see that evolving? Do you see it getting better? And maybe you can benchmark that against some other verticals. The S&P is through the roof somehow, some way. Where is life sciences in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's getting better. It was getting better, and then we had, all the global uncertainty this year, which led to a bit of a pause again. But now, what I'm hearing from our founders and from our investors is that it's picking up again now. They had hoped to be way further along at this point this year because of the positivity I think people felt in January, and then we had a bit of a couple month pause, but it's starting to pick back up again, and so I do feel like there is, a lot of hope. I also think it is still harder. Investors are looking for deeper and more diligence, and of course they want things further along than they ever were, as they always do. And I think they're still putting money into less, but the companies they're putting into, they're backing more. And planning to back them along the pipeline versus them having to scramble for things. So there are positives and negatives to that. In a way, there's a contraction of the number of shots on goal, which is never great. But the shots on goal maybe are taking their shots from a little closer to the basket. Um, that's the worst
But
analogy
it
ever,
does
but it
feel
makes sense
it.
in my head.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it does feel a little bit more winner take all. So the other thing, maybe the gorilla in the room, at least in life science and biotech, is the industry's pivot to China. How is that reverberating through your portfolio companies? And do you see that also in other industries, or is this really life science specific?
I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's more life science specific. I have not seen that as prevalent in San Diego as I've heard it is in other areas. Um, and I wonder if part of that is just, people choose San Diego because of the lifestyle as well in many ways. And so people who want those industries and those companies here are not just doing it because we have an amazing life science ecosystem, but because we have an amazing, place to live. And again, people drawn to San Diego are much more that work-life balance. And the interesting thing I see is, somebody hits it big and they take a pause and they go coach their kid's soccer team, and then they might stand up a venture fund to help somebody else, and they may look to partner in other things, but they've had their win and they're not out like you see in Boston or the Bay Area a lot. They get the win, they're immediately grinding and going for the next win because they got to win again. And here it's much more of a give back mentality. And I don't have to leave, I don't have to do this, but they want to help the next people move forward, which I also think helps keep more companies here because they have that support system from the community in a way that maybe if it's more competitive,
Hmm,
it's easier to hop to another
very
country that
interesting.
entices you with something.
Yeah, I wonder about that a little bit. I mean, a lot of the reverberations of this pivot to China are being felt in the sense that investors want to make sure that, you know, any biotech they're putting money in has a China strategy, right? And has an arbitrage opportunity for the early development stuff. But that's tricky because so much of the good foundational translational research is happening in San Diego. And here I'm thinking about companies like Araska, companies like Inhibrix, and now I'm just talking about drug companies, not even tools companies. And of course, San Diego's famous for tools companies, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so maybe there's enough kind of homegrown goodness that there's a little bit of a buffer there.
Yeah, and also, good amount of CROs and CDMOs here. Like it may just be that we have the breadth of the ecosystem where we don't have as many of the large companies in this space, but we have enough in the other, other stages and other sectors of life science that kind of keep them here because, when you have everything you need here, even though the cost of living is more expensive, you know it's okay to have a smaller place because San Diego is your living room. You don't have to be inside. It doesn't get cold and it doesn't really rain, and it is funny because people get super depressed when it's cloudy. I'm like, it's a bit of weather. It's kind of cool. But I imagine in another year I'll probably be
It
depressed when it's
won't
cloudy
last,
too.
don't worry. Um, no, that's fantastic. It makes me think a lot about, what it means to be an ecosystem. Ecosystems have inherent kind of buffers built into them if they're healthy, right? Ecosystems are resilient almost by definition, right? And I think that's why maybe what you're doing is so important because it's this resiliency. It's why you should root for your competitors if they're in the ecosystem to also do well, right?
Yeah, and and if companies have options, it strives everyone to be better, and I also think it forces organizations to either think about leaping to the next curve, as Guy Kawasaki always says, which Connect has always kept an eye on. And I'll say that's something that actually I learned from our friend Dr. Elaine Ham too, is 15 years ago, somebody wanted to come into my space. He was like fighting to defend my territory. And then as Elaine became closer colleagues and friends, she's like, let them go do the other cool thing, which is how I wound up in AI and healthcare. I was at Tulane and somebody's like, I want to do what you're doing. It's like, fine, have it. And I was like, I'm going to go do this. And honestly, it's been one of the most amazing things for my career ever. The gift of learning that there is always something new and interesting you can do. And if somebody wants what you've done, let them have it and maintain it and go do the other cool new thing. And it is way more interesting. And that's kind of what Connect has done for decades, and how we've constantly iterated on what we're doing at this moment is leaping to that next curve so that we're not the people cutting ice out of lakes who are, 3 iterations ago and out of business.
No, I think that's great advice for anybody at any stage in the career. Is not to get overly nostalgic for what you've built so far, but to keep the challenges fresh. All right, let's think about in that vein. I usually ask our guests kind of at the end to think about, if you are successful at what you're doing, or if we all are successful at what we're doing, which is trying to leverage these new technologies to improve healthcare, or more broadly to innovate to improve mankind. If you're successful 5, 10 years from now, what does innovation in San Diego look like, and what is specifically sort of AI in healthcare done for us?
Yeah, so this is where I think adding healthcare serves as a tremendous model, because it's one of the first places where the boundaries have blurred. And I think blurring those boundaries more and more between different innovation verticals, whether you're looking, if we're talking about life science, looking at drug discovery, diagnostics, devices, data, care delivery, patient interaction, robotics, AI operations, they all integrate. And I think the winning ecosystems, or the winning organizations, if you're looking at the companies, are not the ones who have the best tech or the smartest person in the room. They're the ones who figure out how to actively deploy and embrace tech, data, AI into their operational core with kind of that trust, that intelligence, that intentional integration that transforms their geography and their ecosystem as a whole, and again takes it to that next level. And I think that's what success will look like, is that we haven't just done this amazing thing, and we haven't just kind of in Connect's role especially, haven't just elevated to what was needed next, which is the conduit, making the ecosystem behave more like an ecosystem. But that in doing that, those boundaries have blurred and friction becomes less, and it's easier for entrepreneurs to navigate and easier for science and technology to advance. That's my I have a dream speech.
All right, I love it, and I take your point. In the old days, we used to think about the MVPs in the companies were the polyglots, the ones who could connect the dots, and I think that's as important as ever. I think you are a shining example of one of those polyglots.
Oh, thanks.
All right, James. Last word. See you at Bio. See you in San Diego.
I'll see you at Bio, and we will see you at the Tuesday reception where we relaunch the AAIH Fat Tuesday. Anyone who wants information on that should email you or email me so they can get an invite. It is invite only. We're partnering with the BLPN, the Bullpen folks, which is an invite only group of CEOs and investors, with the Gulf South team. So our good friend Dr. Elaine Ham and Chris Khalil, Tulane and Novick, with Connect, and then the Alliance for AI and Healthcare powered by Connect, which are all coming together to throw a really great reception in the courtyard at a really cool building about a 12-minute walk from the convention center. So anyone who wants to come hang with us and have a good glass of wine or beer and some snacks, we're partnering with our local SBDC, our Small Business Development Corp network, to have some taste of there as well. So a little taste of San Diego there, in addition to the New Orleans flair.
Can't wait. James Zanewicz, thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Rafael.
This has been another episode of the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. Hopefully by now you've subscribed to the show, but if not, go ahead and click that subscribe button and leave us a review. And please do pay us a visit at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com to learn more about how AI is transforming precision medicine. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.